Kelly Hill Ross, and welcome back to the show. We have an interesting show today, and it's all about things that are affecting us today when we talk about mental health. Mental health, drug addiction, homelessness. How do we cope with that? How do we cope with chronic pain? As you can see, I've got all these pills on the table, and sometimes when we are in pain, we go to our doctors and we ask, give us something for the pain. And then just by taking those pills, sometimes, we become addicted. On the board back here, I have signatures of individuals who at one time or another were either homeless or addicted or stressed out, and they didn't know what to do. And part of the program that we had and part of their commitment was to sign their signature to say that they're going to stay straight, not give up, keep up hope. And I have a stack of cards here from a lot of the individuals who just wrote on the cards just how they felt. Well, Norman Jones and I, we sat down and we talked about trauma, how it affects the brain, and what the body is going through. So stay tuned, get your cup of coffee, your tea, favorite beverage, or you can get, something to write with if you want to take notes, and enjoy the show.
Man like that, when you say that he is as good as can be. Wanna go to school, a man like me. I came out when you on your own stuff. Cause that's how you belong to me. Hey, I try to get with me. I wanna go see me. Honest bag. I wanna go with you. Man like that.
Hi Norman, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
It is a beautiful day today, and I am so happy that we are having a chance, an opportunity to talk about a subject that you have been introduced to, know about, and work in that profession. So first of all, tell me a little bit about yourself. Where are you from?
I'm originally from Charleston, West Virginia. It's a great place to grow up. Very tight community of African Americans, structured around industrial area in the Kanawha Valley and the capital of West Virginia. And it was a pretty prosperous community when I was growing up. Very different now, but a good platform to get launched from.
Okay. So now, how long have you been here in
Uh,
Baltimore?
So I've been working in the Baltimore area for it's almost a decade now. But I actually have lived mostly in Montgomery and Prince George's County and commute to Baltimore.
Okay, all right. And that commute brings you into Baltimore to do what, your mental health counseling, or?
Right, so I've done Christian counseling with the Counseling Center out of Baltimore, and I've done what's called PRP, which is a psychiatric rehabilitation programs, which deals with mental health issues, but providing ancillary services. And right now, I'm directly a mental health provider. I do therapy with clients who are dealing with dual diagnosis, which is mental health and substance abuse. The most fascinating group of people I've ever worked with
Wow.
in 40 years.
Wow, okay. So that brings me back to some conversations that we've had in the past, because we talked about how it has affected us, both personally, and I understand that you were in the military.
Right.
And from that point on, what was it that you noticed being in the military and then coming out? What were some issues that, you had?
So, fortunately, I chose to be in the Navy, which didn't directly get me in the line of fire, but I was at the height of the Vietnam War, so I knew a lot about what was going on in the war and what kind of destruction was taking place, and sort of like Agent Orange and all that kind of stuff, and I had friends who were in combat. So we were in a very unique situation because when we came back to the country was very anti-military and anti-soldiers. I mean, you didn't get anything like you get now. You know, we are proud of your accomplishments, and you know, we recognize your service. My brother was an older vet in the Air Force, and he said, look, get rid of your uniform, get rid of all that GI stuff, and you know, just try to blend in. And that was the sense of what we were asked to do, except most of us had come out of some really horrible experiences and didn't know what to do with it. And a lot of it was traumatic, and the reception we got was in some ways traumatic. And you would go away for a year or two and come back, and the country would be unrecognizable.
Wow.
And it was the adjustment. You know, we were part of the Veterans Readjustment movement because it was a huge readjustment to civilization. And a lot of people didn't make it. In fact, I got involved in the Vet Center in the 80s, in the mid-80s, and by that time, as many vets had committed suicide and died in the war.
Wow, that is just unbelievable. And people just, what did they think about that? I mean, you know, the mental illness was coming on, but people just sort of took it as, okay, this is just what happens when you come out of the military, or...
These Vietnam vets are crazy. Stay away from them. That's
Stay
what
away
people
from them.
and you know, there were guys driving around with plastic explosives in their trunk, so there was some reality to that. And the other thing is there's a real tie into what's going on now, because the way they were treating people was they were giving them opiates to calm them down, and they were mailing them in packets. So, I mean, just way more than the person could responsibly use. So people were selling Percocet, Percodan, all this stuff on the street. I didn't know about any of this before I got involved in the Vet Centers program, but there were a lot of things going on back then that are actually going on now, but more involve veterans, and maybe still do. I'm not in contact with Iraq and Afghanistan veterans, but those wars are just as ugly, and people are just as scarred coming out of them. So we have a whole new generation of guys who are struggling that are not really getting the kind of services that they need. But what I got really interested in was our response and approach to trauma, because that's what people were dealing with, traumatic issues that it was almost unmanly to talk about them or to process them, and there were very few people with expertise in dealing with that.
So when you came out, how did you cope with it? How did it affect your family and just you in general?
Well, it's interesting because I came out. I did not come out of the Vietnam War with traumatic symptoms.
Okay.
And that was because my service as a radio man on a big, heavy cruiser that was the meanest thing. No Chinese boats or Vietnamese boats were going to attack our ship. I mean,
really?
It's like a 4-year-old coming up trying to beat up Muhammad Ali. It was just, that was out of the question. And we were off the shore, so we shot our guns from the shore to the land. And so we were never actually in physical combat danger, except things that happen at sea, of course, that are bad. But we just, the time I was on the ship, I felt almost completely safe.
So let's jump over on the music side. So when they were talking about Freddie's Dead,
Right.
Superfly, all those movies, they're talking about, drugs.
Right.
And then you had The Godfather that came out, and I think there was a word in there that says something about, give the drugs to the black folks. I'm not sure if that's exactly what was said. So that whole genre, we went from nobody really cared about the Vietnam vets.
Right.
If you had a mental condition, you just had a mental condition, and
Right.
they just said, well, he was in the military. So let's bring it forward now to today.
Right.
So you're involved in some other programs, and what are you doing now that's different now than from the past?
So one of the things we know now is back when we were doing the work we were doing, we didn't know anything about the part of the brain called the amygdala.
Okay.
And the amygdala, I first learned about the amygdala in 2004 when I had a mini stroke. I didn't even know it existed.
Now,
But the amygdala is a part of the brain located at sort of the back of the brain.
the back of the brain.
And
Okay.
it's really tied to the old brain.
The old brain.
The old brain, and it deals with traumatic situations where the life is threatened, and it's kind of like the big shutdown valve. So if it's too bad, it shuts down your thinking and your ability to really function at anything other than a survival level. And it gives you three choices: you can fight, you can run, or you can freeze. Now, if you can imagine, if you're in a constant state of trauma and all your choices boil down to those three, you're not going to go anywhere. You're just going to be stuck in
a
a
circle.
cycle
Yes.
of pretty much destruction.
Okay.
So we didn't know that the amygdala existed. I mean, I got training,
Uh-huh.
and we thought we were getting the best training that was out there, but the amygdala never came up.
Uh-huh.
So when you look at some of our communities, many of the people in those communities, particularly if it's a culture of drugs and violence, and sirens going off all times of the day and the night, and police jumping out, then people are in a lot of trauma all the time. And see, when the amygdala gets triggered, it just goes back to the original event, and it'll just replay it over and over and over. So you can get hit by the smell, the sound, the music, the feel of a place.
And
So-
it will trigger.
And it will trigger.
Okay.
And you don't have control over those triggers unless you really have to process it and work through it and begin to understand it. So a lot of people don't understand their trauma, and it's difficult to try to go into the contact because it brings back feelings that are not pleasant.
So, pills,
Right.
foundation,
Uh-huh.
revolving
Yeah,
cycle.
so what's really interesting is, a lot of people get addicted to opiates because of pain. So you go on Oxycontin, you get prescribed, legal, but then you have to pay for it out of your pocket. It gets to be very expensive. It's much easier to get heroin on the street,
Wow.
even though it's probably going to be laced with fentanyl and other kinds of stuff that is not good. I heard recently somebody died recently of rat poison. One of my clients' close relatives.
So, what's the answer? What's the solution? Are we just going to continue to go around in a circle, or?
Well, I think the solution, because it's a bigger issue. I think the solution is that somebody has to take the lives of American citizens seriously.
Okay.
Right now, we don't. That one of the fathers, somebody put out a book saying that one of the fathers of the Sandy Hook children just made this story up. It was actually a published book. So he had to sue the publisher to get him to take it off the market because, you have a child who dies and somebody puts out a book saying he made it all up. That is just the craziest thing I've ever heard of. But that's the kind of onslaught that people are facing today in terms of not really being that concerned about the life of the individual citizens, cities, towns, villages. I'm from West Virginia, which has always been one of the poorest states in the country. And Huntington and Charleston, West Virginia, are two towns. They used to be considered cities, but the towns that have experienced tremendous drug problems. And whenever people are desperate, you don't just have addiction, you have mental health issues, you have issues of self-esteem, just the quality of life. And I think also you got, New Jersey now has bad water, joining Flint. They
Yeah.
got to bust in water. So I mean, all of that to me is tied into just the level of life that people live. And I would say my biggest challenge, and I've had clients who taught me, is understanding how difficult life is for a lot of people who've been struggling all their lives just to stay above water.
Right. And there's just no way out. No way out.
Well, let's put it this way: there seems to be no way out. So when there seems to be no way out, the only thing people have to hang on to is faith. Because if you don't have any faith and there seems to be no way out, either you just explode in anger or you give up.
Okay. And you've been doing this for how many years now?
Well, specifically, I've been doing this for 3 years. But this is a kind of a revisit because I used to work with Vietnam vets. And we didn't understand the issues back in those days nearly as much as we do now.
Okay.
But when you start messing with that amygdala, that part of your brain in the back of your brain will take over, and it will. You have the options of running, fighting, or freezing, and that just doesn't get you anywhere.
There will be a solution eventually.
So, if we decide we really want to take on these issues, there are programs and ways to do it, but they're not cheap.
I grew up around here, Town, and coming up as a kid, you know what I mean. I like the chaos. Basically, it was follow for real. I mean, everything that other people like to do, I like to do. As long as it was about chaos and you know what I'm saying, doing something that's violent. I like that type of stuff. So I grew up around that.
Okay.
I mean, I ain't had no father. My mother was the lady of the house. So I grew up without a father, so I had to learn how to be my own man. You know what I'm saying? I got 3 sisters. I'm the only boy, so I was always the only male in the house. So you know what I mean. So I had to deal with all females. You know what I mean? That was different type of character from all females. And at the age of 12, 11, 12, I started selling drugs. I found a way of, trying to get some fast money. But even though my mother always got us everything we wanted, I still wanted to, be a man and become my own man and be independent. So I started, hustling, selling drugs without my mother. I'm looking for change now. In the beginning, it was just about getting clean. You know what I'm saying? Now that I'm clean, I'm trying to work on character. I'm trying to build my manhood back. I'm trying to build my respect back. And I'm trying to build trust back through my family, through my loved ones, through the streets. Through people, period. You know what I mean? I just want, to be. When I leave, I want everybody to know that I was clean. And I did the right thing. You know what I'm saying? I want my grandkids to, you know what I'm saying, to know that I was a good grandfather. You know what I'm saying? When I leave this world, I don't want nobody to say, well, he did this and everything that was wrong. I want people to say the right things about me.
Yes. Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate you sharing with us.
Working with people with substance abuse issues and mental health issues, the missing ingredient is the spiritual ingredient. One thing people need universally to go from a bad place to a good place is a sense of hope. And where do you get a sense of hope from? You get a sense of hope from something bigger than yourself, something that sometimes people call Allah, some people call the Creator, some people call God, and some people just call the person the great being of my understanding. So we don't normally, from an academic perspective, put that into the training of professionals, but I run into it all the time with my clients. And I think that we really need a new creative approach that combines the spiritual with what we know psychologically, with what we know physiologically. And we also need more comprehensive services, the kind of services that were offered with wraparound, where you give people mentors, where you have money set aside for people to do the things that they need to do to better themselves, perhaps take some classes or do the kinds of things that people need to do that will take them out of the place they are in to a new place. We are just woefully under funded in terms of the kinds of qualities of services that are needed. There's lots of funds out there, but there's a lot of competition among the folks who are providing the treatment to acquire the funds versus help the people who are needy get the help that they need. And the needs are growing, not lessening, because as our communities bear less of the shoulder or burden of bringing our young people into full adulthood, many more adults come into adulthood lost. And this is a very difficult problem, and it's cataclysmic at this point. So that's my thought about that. That's my opinion. Thank you.
The only reason why I'm here, we're here, is to help each other to transition. And just because I'm up here doesn't mean that I don't have my own issues that I need to transition. So you all help me because I hear your input, and that inspires me. Because what you do, and when I see your transition, I feel it in here. And I want you to be happy and to feel like there is hope. No matter where you start, there is hope. Well, I hope you enjoyed listening to what Mr. Jones had to say. And I hope you enjoyed the interview with the young man who is on the path, on his way to recovery. And you can see how easily it can be where you can get caught up in the wrong environment. So I hope you took some notes. I hope you can use the information. And until the next time, I want you to stay safe and God bless.